All right, so welcome everybody, and we are talking about Gaia. Who has heard already about Gaia? Not Gaia-X, about Gaia. Okay, so Gaia, she was the goddess of Earth. Great, yeah. Had some fun with Uranus, and around this was just chaos. So her children were the Titans, some weird people like Kronos, who attacked his father and ate his children. But finally they went to the Olymp, and this is something we will try to achieve as well with Gaia-X. And I want to give you some background about Gaia-X and the key objectives. And what I've heard before was very close to regain sovereignty in the digital space, which is not just for the civil society of relevance, it is also for the economy of relevance. And this was a key trigger around Gaia-X. And it's not because I'm lazy, but I would like to show you a short video, if possible, about just give you a first intro, and then I will step into the details where we are right now and where we hope to be in short time. So if you can just have a look at the video, or probably I can start it. No. Then, all these are trying to take care about the video. In the meantime, the mission here is, and this is one of the key objectives, to have a blank screen.
The word Gaia stands for our planet Earth as a smart, self-regulating ecosystem. Translating natural intelligence into today's digital world, Gaia-X is a new, fair and evolving open data infrastructure ecosystem. It promotes innovation through access to data and sovereign data sharing based on trust between all involved actors. Rooted in European federalist and democratic traditions, Gaia-X is based on values including openness, fairness, privacy, security and transparency. Industry experts have identified roadblocks in the application of new technologies, like artificial intelligence and smart services, due to a lack of trust in the current landscape of storing, sharing, and handling data. Users of cloud services have a variety of concerns after uploading their confidential information. Firstly, they fear losing control over their data. And secondly, they fear becoming stuck with one service provider. The necessary technical mechanisms to exchange data are complex and require extensive efforts in terms of cost, time and skilled staff to implement new service solutions. This makes it especially costly for small and medium-sized enterprises to digitalize their business's processes. What's missing is one widely adopted set of standard rules and the possibility for digital service users to maintain control over their data when moving into the cloud and edge environment. Gaia-X mitigates these concerns by developing a framework whereby actors agree on a single set of guidelines and a common set of values and standards to create trust among providers and users. The foundation of this framework are the Federation Services, in short, GXFS. What are its values and goals? Data sovereignty, privacy, confidentiality, security, technology neutrality, interoperability and interconnectivity are the core values of the Gaia-X framework, developed by a community-driven process. Gaia-X creates a fair and competitive environment. So, who can join? Business companies, startups, research institutions, developers? Anyone can join Gaia-X. Participants will be able to inform the community about their products and services, gain certification, exchange data with others, and develop new business models and services together, tapping into previously unused potentials. In other words, Gaia-X provides an openness as a new alternative to traditional proprietary technology. Specifically, this concept of openness translates into two key elements of Gaia-X: open specifications and open source code at its core. Gaia-X ensures this openness through federation services and a trust ecosystem. But how can this be achieved? By establishing a digital ecosystem where data is made securely available, collated and exchanged in a trustworthy environment, with data owners retaining full sovereignty over their data. Gaia-X does not seek to become a hyperscaler. Instead, Gaia-X taps into Europe's strength and experience with federated approaches. Gaia-X develops the basic software components necessary to set up a federated ecosystem. Gaia-X Federation Services, GXFS, are the toolbox that makes such an ecosystem operational, where individual participants join forces to offer services, share data, and create new business models in a trustable and verified environment. Everyone can apply to become a Gaia-X participant and join as a provider, consumer, or federator in order to connect with others to develop new services and innovative products. This federated data ecosystem fosters innovative, protected data exchange based on the mentioned concept of openness and transparency. In summary, Gaia-X and GXFS help to create trust, maintain control over data, and overcome complex and proprietary technological hurdles with a fair, community-driven, secure, open data framework that everyone can join. Welcome to the Gaia-X community.
All right. Now, probably you know when you start such projects, there are some problems you have to address. You try to understand them. You build up a concept. Then it will be overwhelmed with thousands of other wishes, like for Christmas, and you try to reduce it to a pragmatic level. Then you produce tons of papers, millions of PowerPoints, you do some videos, and then you have to deliver. And this is where we are right now. We have to deliver around Gaia-X, which is a challenge by itself, but we have taken this. And just as you probably understood out of the video, we are really trying to achieve a new model which is more or less opposite to the typical platform business, to build up digital data ecosystems where people can collaborate and work together jointly, mainly for data-driven business models. So this is the key purpose, which is for now still a more B2B related activity, but it will come to the civil society sooner, as you might expect, when we talk about healthcare, financial services, and all these use cases which are going to be built up on top of Gaia-X. Now, there are a lot of lighthouse projects already. For example, Catena-X is a joint collaboration of huge competitors, which is already a sign by itself. All automotive manufacturers like Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, Ford, they are working jointly in a collaborative way together because they are addressing the same problems when we talk about supply chain monitoring, carbon footprint monitoring, and a lot of other business use cases they cannot solve by themselves. So although they're in competition, they understood we have to work jointly and we have to engage our suppliers, which are thousands of SMEs mainly, to be part of our ecosystem. And therefore, we need to take care how to build up a level of trust, how to build up some ideas, how to incentivize the relationship, that everyone sees advantages out of this collaboration, which is already a good sign. And there are a lot of others, one of them out of Netherlands, like Smart Connected Supplier Network. So some of these huge lighthouse projects which are fully supported and fully engaged. And beside this, there are already 20, 30, 40 other projects which are really looking forward to adopt this Gaia-X concept, because it's a concept. It's not a product, it's not a service. In the first place, it's a concept. Anyone can use this concept because it's open and can be accessed by anyone to utilize it and to build their own ecosystem based on these principles. And this is, of course, aligned with the EU strategy, data strategy, and you can always see a portion of cloud and a portion of data, some high-impact projects. this fuzzy term around data spaces, I don't want to step into this as well, but at least it's also a logical organization of data, how to aggregate them and how to exchange them, and then still the cloud. But what is now also emerging is a so-called IPSE CRS initiative, important project of common European interest, with 12 member states. Netherlands is also engaged with around 160 million euro to build up digital infrastructures. And this is very close to the question about interconnection services when we talk about decentralized and distributed systems and how to bring this together and build a good ecosystem, not just on the logical layer, also on the technical and infrastructure layer. Now, the key objectives is, and this was always talking about data sovereignty, not digital sovereignty. Digital sovereignty is something much broader. And you cannot just achieve digital sovereignty just with some functional designs. This is much more. But when we talk about data sovereignty, which is already a good scoping, and also talking about data availability, you cannot build up business models if you don't have any guarantees that you will get the data in a reliable format, in a reliable way, 24/7 or whatever. Otherwise, you're getting stuck in your business model. So there must be clear agreements between the parties, the data issuer and the data receiver. And this in highly complex and distributed environments. And therefore, we promoted a mix of functional and interoperable components. One of them is the federation services. I will come to this later. The regulatory framework, so the governance of such ecosystems. If you try to do it from scratch, you will take at least 1 year, 2 years to get all the parties agreed on the same principles and rules. It's even better if thousands of people are already tried to build a good blueprint and then just talk about the tiny details behind it. And you need a kind of trust framework if you talk about decentralized ecosystems who can be federated. Federated means they can interact based on common principles, based on common standards, and you need a trust relationship between these federations. Because I'm still convinced, in the first place, we have to talk about the individual federation. They should organize themselves. There's no overruling entity who's taking care who is allowed to interact with whom. Should be a self-determined approach. But then if they see, well, it makes sense that we work together and we have the same target groups and we have the same members, it should be very easy to federate them and bring them together and have a joint approach. Because this is what we are talking about, these distributed environments from the cloud to the edge. And Gaia-X is not a European cloud provider and not a European cloud aggregation. Because Gaia-X is much more than just cloud. It is about edge, it is about data, it's about sovereign identities. It's much more than just cloud computing. And we still need the hyperscalers as well on board, because Gaia-X should be executable beyond European borders. We need also Gaia-X in Shenzhen and in Brazil and everywhere, because these are the supply chains and the outreach of the economy, at least out of Europe. And therefore, we need to take the challenge how to deal with data in distributed environments, and we need to take the challenge that we have to distribute workloads from the cloud into the edge and vice versa. So we're talking finally about this cloud-edge continuum. Just simply saying, and I think AMS-IX, I think the peak is around 10 terabit per second. And an autonomous car will produce up to 1 terabit per day. If you want to push them all over the AMS-IX environment, well, the limit is 1 million cars to be managed just in a hyperscaler infrastructure. So this is not affordable, and this is one of thousands of use cases we have to address. So we need to optimize how we work with data, and for sure, the workload will be shifted into the edge, and you need pre-processing, and even with latency. If you want to have real-time processing, you need less than 5 to 10 milliseconds for as latency, and this cannot, and therefore you need a device 50 to 90 kilometers around the area where you need the data processing. So these are key facts, and if you bring this all together, it's clear we have to talk about decentralized environments with various use cases. Or what we are doing, and as already said, it's not a hyperscaler. Someone of the press said, well, probably it's a virtual hyperscaler, and then, no, let's do it a European virtual hyperscaler and something like this. This is not the key objective of Gaia-X. anyone can do what he wants, and he can say, well, I build a community, and these are just European providers, fine to go. But this is not in its core the concept of Gaia-X. We are talking about federated structures, and this is not according to territories, it's according to logical groups who are working jointly together. This is a kind of federation as we see it from our point of view, based on open standards and open source. And this means we are talking about a multitude of ecosystems who are working internally organized, ecosystem 1, 2, 3, but we need a kind of Gaia-X trust framework, as I said, to federate them, to let them interact. So there we have a registry service and a compliance service to verify the completeness of self-descriptions. And it is assembled in this trust plane, management plane, usage plane, which is quite similar to the NIST 500 definition of federated clouds. So we are not that far away. It's not re-invent the wheel. We just take what is out there and bring it into a context and build try to close the white spots for this high-level objective to regain sovereignty in the digital space and to address this complexity of distributed system. And logically, then we talk about a federation for construction or mobility or Gaia-X or pharma. These are these individual ecosystems where they should work seamlessly together if it is appropriate. And we have some principles behind it. So a federation, just to explain it again, as similar to an ecosystem, it's a joint group of stakeholders who are working for common business objectives, can be driven by business, by domains, by any kind of use case like supply chain monitoring, as I mentioned for Gaia-X. These participants should agree on joint rules because this is also a level of trust relationship and also the common technology for this interoperability. And you need someone who's going to operationalize such a federation. So you need someone, I'm telling you, you are part of this federation, so you need a membership, something like this, and you need other services, I will come to this later, and therefore we promote a kind of core services, which is, as we say, a kind of toolbox to bring step-by-step advanced services to manage such federations and to support the various use cases on a first abstraction layer. Because we cannot go too close to the use cases, but we try to support the core technology and the principles behind it. And we made a bunch of specifications, as I said, more than 1,000 pages, what you can expect. Now the coding is underway, and what is there is open source, Apache License 2. Anyone can use it, take it, modify it, integrate it, whatever. It's just to have a common core basis where we say, here we need to apply the technical standards, otherwise you're getting disconnected in your ecosystem. It is not a ready-to-go product. There's no product owner behind it. It's a community-driven approach. It is incubated by the German ministry. So I have some play money, 40 million euros, to make this happen, to promote this code. And then by end of this year, we will hand everything over into the Eclipse Foundation for further takeoff by community-driven advancements. And open specifications, open standards, and what exactly is it? And one is applied, we are promoting this SSI paradigm, self-sovereign IDs, which is a real paradigm shift for the economy. Currently, you need to register in each of the pages, again, with your credentials. Even for this event, you had to enter all your name, your address, and something like this. In the future, you have your personal wallet, and you decide whom to share which information for which purpose. And you never transfer any information persistently to other parties if you are not in agreement with this processing of data. So this is the SSI principle based on wallet technology, and therefore we have, besides the authentication authorization part, an organizational credential manager. This is to indicate this is a company, I have my digital identity, and I can also issue identities for my principals, for my employees, and say, you are allowed to go to the more IP, and I'm going to pay for you, and you can get the payment details from the organization, and my employee doesn't need to share anything except his ID, and then you can give him his credential to access this venue. So this is more or less the principle behind it. With a personal credential, which is a so-called wallet, you can do it on the smartphone, in a browser, or even in the cloud. It's something to store your individual credentials, which indicates, here's my passport to be part of Catena-X, for example. And then we have the federated catalog, and this is very close to this description of services approach, technical description of services. We're using standards for resource description frameworks because we are assuming a huge complexity in these service descriptions when it comes up to deployment, orchestration, monitoring, and so on and so forth. In this sense, it is an open technology. The funny thing, or the good thing, is we can combine it with verifiable credentials. So if once someone states, I have a cool service and it is operated in a data center with ISO 27001 certification, then it would be helpful to identify, is there really an appropriate certification or attestation with the appropriate scope, and who can approve it. So if this is issued by a certified entity with a verified credential, good to go. If it is not issued by a known company, then probably you have to reassess if this is a true claim. So these are the things where we build ecosystems of trust as well. So if you have a set of trusted entities who are issuing such verification statements for certain claims within a self-description, it is much easier to have a compliance assessment in the future. And this is, with the catalog, also self-descriptions of participants. It's always good to know who are my counterparts when I agree on contracts and something like this. So you need this level of transparency about the company, about what is the regulation behind it, and is this just a sub-entity of a non-European entity, something like this. This is part of a transparency approach we are promoting with the self-descriptions. And when it comes to data sharing, well, on one side you need technical compliance in terms of the data exchange, and you need, in the first place, organizational compliance in terms of having a contract. So what is agreed? What is the usage policy? Probably I'm just sharing you the data for the purpose of supply chain monitoring for the next 4 weeks. And then you agree that you're not going to process the data anymore, and you don't share it with others. So this is a first step of agreement, how to share data in this area of Gaia-X, and then you can go further with some technical enforcement, monitor it, and bring it into a level of liability between both parties. So this is with the contractual framework, and then sovereign data exchange, and then we have this compliance assessment where we look in terms of onboarding criteria to assess, is everything fine, are all the information accurate, can we trust them, and can we use them for technical purposes, and so on and so forth. So these are the federation services based on a set of standards, like mainly out of W3C, but Gaia-X is not a Web3 environment. It's just we are taking the key standards which are relevant for decentralized ecosystems. And there are still some moving targets, talking about various blockchain implementations and the war of blockchains and verifiable credentials. I don't care. We are offering now first solutions, and we can adopt further interoperability standards when they are already agreed. So it should be an open ecosystem, and we need to work further on these services. But there's a good ground layer based on these standards already exposed by the architectural conceptual model. You can get all the information, like the video you saw, and a bunch of more videos to explain it. It's just 3 to 5 minutes, so it's like YouTube, and in the school you can consume them wherever you are. It is good to get a better understanding, because Gaia-X is a beast. It's really a complex approach, but we try to bring these things together and really showcase in this year already that Gaia-X is going to be functional, which is driven by these lighthouse projects, by a lot of projects. Like in Germany, we have Mary Space, for example. It's a very cool project. They are taking care to take all the munition out of the Second World War, out of the Baltic Sea and North Sea, and also to plant seagrass, to take carbon out of the air, and take care about offshore wind parks. And probably you know better than us that if you have a service cycle around an offshore wind park, it takes you up to 100,000 euro just to go there and do all these services. So having an environment about predictive maintenance, AI-based monitoring and all these things, it is worth compared to all the costs we have with Gaia-X so far. And so a lot of use cases, explainer videos here, and that's it from my side. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, do we have any questions, Andreas?
Before you go to the coffee break.
Yeah, okay, well, we will go to coffee break just a couple of seconds. So, I mean, I just did want to ask you, I'm actually surprised how much, how far it's moved ahead in the last couple of years. I remember just looking at it a few years ago, it was all still on paper, and it seems to have made a lot of advances. So what are the next big challenges? And perhaps a bit, you didn't go so much into, what about, will there need to be additional infrastructure put in place, or can we work with communities like IXPs and so on around Europe to actually harness the infrastructure they already have there?
Well, there are a lot of parallel activities, and these things must come together at a certain point. I would say right now, Gaia-X is a kind of operating system for such decentralized ecosystems to orchestrate them, to bring them together and have a common baseline in these four core dimensions, like how to manage identities, how to manage service descriptions and federated catalogs, sovereign data exchange, and so on. But, for example, we are working with AMS-IX and Links together on this IX API to have also interoperability in these interconnection services, because I think the future is, when you're talking about end-to-end services in this cloud edge continuum, for sure you need interconnection services with quality of service. You cannot route it through the internet. And this is something we are going to show now with Structura X in the next couple of months, that we build up federations in each of these environments, different stacks like OpenNebular and Sovereign Cloud Stack and probably even Azure, I don't care. It can be done on any of these infrastructure stacks, and then link them via internet exchanges to show the advancement if you have direct connections between these entities versus the public internet. Right. And it's also a kind of trust factor. If you have direct connections, especially for the banking sector, where they're going to build up custodians for fraud detection and so on, they need very reliable connection, but they want to make use of the internet because they cannot opt in always for new lines because these ecosystems are very dynamic. Probably for a couple of weeks you have this connection point, and then you have the next connection point. So just the provisioning of such services is, they cannot wait, typically they need to wait a couple of weeks. I think IXs can make a much more dynamic and faster provisioning, something like this.
Brilliant.